topic that we're going to discuss today, which is embracing diversity, is really a topic that's very close to my heart. And not only at a professional level, but also at a personal level, it's extremely close to my heart. And as I go along, I'll share the story of why embracing diversity is so important for me. I'm going to start off by, maybe I should just give a little bit of background. One of the things that I was involved with when I started working, my first huge assignment, I was in the military, and I worked as a clinical psychologist intern. And during the time, you remember the referendum, yes or no? I was doing my internship in the military, one military hospital. And at that time, I was the only black psychologist that they had. And there was the referendum, and shortly thereafter, the integration of the different forces. With the integration of the different forces, I then got involved with the managing and embracing diversity workshops, which were primarily focused on getting the different forces to be integrated and to work well together and create a better future for South Africa. So that was my first experience with managing diversity. And it was really a very emotional period, a very trying period. Picture this, you sitting and you waiting for somebody that you're going to consult with as a psychologist, and you read the file of the person, and it says, this guy was at the Namibian border and he used to kill people and drink their blood, black people and drink their blood. And now this guy is coming to therapy in Mali. It was a very interesting session that I had with this guy. So he walks in, he's a firefighter, and he sits down, and the first thing I ask him is, are you comfortable being seen by me? You know, knowing very well that it must be very difficult. Maybe I should say, I feel like the room is not balanced. So I hope you can see me there. So he comes in, and I say to him, look, do you feel comfortable? Because I could refer you to another psychologist. And he says to me, he says, picture this. Picture you're in a room, you are in a building that is on fire. It's burning, you're standing in the balcony, and I'm at the bottom, and I'm saying to you, would you feel comfortable me helping you to get off that building? He says, what you're asking me is very unrealistic. I'm in trouble, I need help, and right now it doesn't matter where I get it from. So that was my first crash course with dealing with diversity, racial diversity, diversity with people of different belief systems, and that sort of thing. And I've become very attached to the topic. And I hope that as I share my story and I share some of the information, I will enthuse you in embracing diversity. One of the videos that I want to share, we don't have time to watch the video, so I'll quickly tell you the story. It's called A Class Divided, and we used it quite a lot in our workshops. And basically what happened in April 1968 with the death of Martin Luther was a lady who then had to deal with grade 4 children who came in, who had just previously appointed or nominated Martin Luther as the hero of the month. And now Martin Luther is dead. And these children are mortified that he had been killed. And all these kids are white and are asking questions, but why? And now she has to try and explain to these innocent kids who probably have not been indoctrinated by a lot of the stuff that we've experienced, why it happened. So she takes them through this exercise, A Class Divided. So the kids walk in and they're asking this question, and she sits them down. And she says to them, right, I've got news for you. I want you to know that blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. They're neater than brown-eyed people. They're more obedient than brown-eyed people. And she gives all the good qualifications to the blue-eyed kids. And as she does that, the blue-eyed kids start sitting up, and the brown-eyed kids start slouching. She does that for the rest of the day. And even as she as she marks their work, she keeps on complimenting the blue-eyed kids and disqualifying the brown-eyed kids. By the end of the day, the brown-eyed kids were monsters. Rebellious, they couldn't learn, they were unproductive in class, they wouldn't listen, they were just very negative. There was very little that she could do with these kids. So they go home, and by the way, she puts collars so that she can identify at a distance who are the brown-eyed kids. So all the brown-eyed kids are walking around with collars on their necks. In the playground, the brown-eyed kids have got collars. And she's given them these messages that now make it very difficult for a brown-eyed kid to play with a blue-eyed kid. Immediately the segregation, the blue-eyed kids are together and the brown-eyed kids are together. At the end, she says to the blue-eyed kids, you can have 5 minutes extra for your break. Brown-eyed kids, come into class because you're slower. I'm going to make sure that I teach you a little more so that you can grasp these concepts. It was a very difficult day for the brown-eyed kids. The following day, they come back to class and she says, yesterday I told you that blue-eyed people are smarter, they're more intelligent, they're brighter, they're charming, and all the qualifications. She says, but well, I was wrong. The brown-eyed kids are actually the ones who are like that. And she swaps the roles. And she gives the blue-eyed kids the collars for the day. And exactly the same behavior that was exhibited by the blue-eyed kids was now exhibited by the brown-eyed kids. The brown-eyed kids were doing better in the tests. The brown-eyed kids were more obedient. They were more loving. They were a pleasure to have in class. The blue-eyed kids, in fact, when you watch it, as she goes through the qualifications of, there's this one child who had been a blue-eyed child the day before and now is brown-eyed. And as she talks about blue-eyed kids are sloppy. This kid is sitting there and is bashing the desk like this, bashing the desk. And he goes on like that. And right from there, the child is rebellious for the rest of the day. So that is the story. And that's a short explanation of what happened. In the end, she says, I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes. She says that she realized then that she had created in her class a microcosm of society. And isn't that what it's like for most of us? We know those experiences. We've lived them. And in South Africa, primarily when we talk about them, we talk about the race card. And yet there's much, much more to it than just the race card. So one of the things that I do is that I'm a lay preacher. And I study the Bible quite religiously and often marvel at some of the things that I see in real life and what's in the Bible. So when I was thinking about it and thinking on how to really visualize and make embracing diversity real, one of the things that I came across and that was very profound for me was the story of creation. That God would say, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over all creeping things that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his image. In his image he created them, male and female. And when God then created man, he gave him dominion over all other things except over each other. The second thing is that he created man in his own image. So as we sit here, and as I stand here, we all in the image of God. Black, white, colored, Indian, male, female, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. In his image, he created them. And for me, it's a business case for managing diversity. It's a case embracing diversity. Just the fact that all of us, none of us, would reflect anything less than what God is. None of us represent the betterness of God over the other. And just based on that, it says that's how we ought to treat each other. And so the story of the video and what it strove to achieve shows how we become cheated of who we truly are when we start wanting to have dominion over the other. As teachers, as principals, as parents, one of the things that I'm profoundly aware of is the fact that all of us are broken. We're all broken. And it is critical that we understand that in any situation, we bring our own brokenness. So even as I stand here as a broken person speaking to broken people. I sound a bit like Musimaiman, right? And that's what it is. And very often, we forget our own brokenness and become so obsessed over the brokenness of others. I feel myself perfect because your brokenness is not my brokenness, so I'll focus on your brokenness. And that's what I become obsessed about, and talk the blue-eyed story through your brokenness. Meanwhile, I'm just as broken. And for me, this understanding is critical for anybody who works with people. It is critical for teachers, for principals, for business people, for anybody who interacts to understand this truth, that all of us are so broken. And our brokenness is different and yet so beautiful. You look at those pots, you know, they are so different and yet so beautiful. And that none of us are complete or have wholeness. What makes us whole is a wholeness that has cracks in it. And that for me is very powerful when I do work with people. One of the things that I do is that I run Bible studies with kids on Saturday. And for me, watching these kids and watching how they relate to each other and some of their brokenness show up, and even some of my brokenness show up, is phenomenal. When I was going through a very difficult time in my life, I would come on Saturday and these kids would run to me and they would jump at me. It would be like I'm the best thing that ever happened to them that day. And I would look at them healing my brokenness at that point, where I felt so unappreciated, so unloved. I would watch these kids love me and heal my brokenness. And that is the power of relationships and the embracing of diversity that we get, because it is in these relationships that our brokenness is either broken further or healed. And in our roles as we sit here, it is critical that we work hard towards restoring that image of God that I speak to, where we work towards restoring the completeness or restoring the faith that people have in themselves. And it can only be done when we embrace this diversity. So diversity is a very huge word. I always talk to people and I say it's a suitcase word. You know, when you open a suitcase and you unpack the suitcase, there's a lot of stuff that comes out. So diversity is a suitcase word because it means a lot of things. And you know, personality, age. I mean, I look at you, you're very young, and you know, if you look at me, I've got a lot of gray hair. It makes us different. We may both be black, but already that's an element of diversity right there. Our personalities are different, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, ethnicity, race, and then moving on to income, where we come from, our personal habits, what is recreational for us, our religion, educational background, geographical location, appearance, parental status, marital status, And then when you go and look at the outer ring, which talks to organizational diversity, or the dimension where you find a different level of diversity, we can talk about school content. What subjects do you teach as opposed to that which I teach? And how does, there's so much that is involved in diversity. And very often, depending on what the pet issue is, we focus on that and that alone. And we lose the richness of humanity. This is a very interesting slide. I use it a lot in the work that I do in the employment equity space. When we work at employment equity issues and we communicate why employment equity is critical for our country, we say to people, the bulk of the people sit at the bottom in terms of economic status. And research that has been done has proved that only 1 out of 1,500 people will move from being a working class to being white collar. And then 1 out of 500 would move to higher professional and managerial roles. 1 out of 200 would move to the next level, the elite level. And at that level, only 1 out of 5 becomes supremely rich or comfortable. Why is this important when we have this discussion today? It is critical because as we sit here as people in the education space, we are the biggest contributors to that. We're the biggest contributors to that. That movement, to a large extent, depends on what we do. And as a teacher, if I sit in class and I have issues with people that are different for whatever one of the reasons that I've mentioned before, I participate in the sifting process. I become a person who determines who moves from this level to that level. The messages that I give to the children in the class, the children that I reward, the children that I consistently tell, you will do well, as opposed to the ones who I say, you know, your brain is just dull. You're never ever going to learn anything. So as we sit here, we're critical to that movement because it is education that to a large extent opens the door for one to move to the next stage. My father's first job was as a, I don't know what they call it, delivery boy. So he worked for Coke, and you know the guys that used to sit at the back of the truck, and when you get to a shop, they would be the ones taking out the cool drinks to put them inside the shop. That was his first job, okay? And he is, I'm first generation urban, so his father relocated to the urban areas, and my father only has a STEM 10. I have a master's in clinical psychology. My father's business, when he eventually had a business, was in the township where he would trade chappies. And I trade much bigger. And to a large extent, it's all about education. It has a lot to do with what he was able to give me as a gift so that I could move from one level to the other. Very often when I do talks on employment equity, people then say to me, yeah, you know, I mean, this employment equity business of yours, it's just making a few people rich. And I say, precisely, that's what it's supposed to do. Employment equity is not about alleviating poverty. It really is about creating a middle class, a black middle class. There's a lot of transformation legislation that address different elements of dealing with the poverty issue. But employment equity has never promised to deal with all issues. So much as the education system is supposed to create an opportunity for employers who are at the lower level to have an opportunity to move to the higher level. Employment equity can never promise to make sure that every single person who is here sits at the top there. However, education can. Education can move more people a little faster. It can create a better future for most of us. It can move the masses to a better place. So for me, the issue of managing diversity in schools is critical because it really talks to the history of our country and ensuring that the bulk of the people who don't stand a chance can have a better opportunity in terms of what they can do for their children, in terms of where their children can end up. Two things, by the way, enable people to move up: education and marriage. True, that's what the research found. So if I get married to a man who is much richer than me, I automatically move from this level to the next, or even higher. Okay? But to get to that place, we need critical mass of these men or these women who are able to move people up. Otherwise, it's just going to be education. So if I, as a teacher, keep giving messages that are negative to these kids, and as I said, that Jane Elliott was saying, the more I gave negative messages to the children, the less they performed in class. What we're doing is that we're just maintaining the status quo. We're just making sure that only 1 out of 1,500 moves to the next level. I think this is known, it's a known fact. 95% of people, especially Black Africans, are poor, and at the top, it's only 10% of the people who are earning 50% of the national income. And that picture's got to change. That picture's got to change. And this is where you come in. This is where I come in. The concept of diversity encompasses accepting and respecting people who are different. It means understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing their individual difference. It's about saying, I see you. You know, there's certain people that you just don't see because nothing interesting about them, and then you go and focus where there's the interest. Embracing diversity for me is about saying, I see you to every parent, saying, I see you to every teacher, saying, I see you to every single child. Is it hard work? Of course it is. It's never going to be easy. Even in the world of work, even in my company, that's what I try to do. To say, I see you to every single one of my employees. And by doing that, saying, I acknowledge you, I acknowledge you're made in the image of God, and I acknowledge that in you is inherent power that needs to be tapped into so that you can become your very best. So her name was Zaza Alberts, my heroine. My father then moved from being that truck boy, that delivery boy, and became a sales manager at Coke. He worked himself up. And when I was in Senate 8, the one day there was a strike at the boarding school. I was in a boarding school, had been moved after the 76 uprising to Limpopo, to a boarding school. You know, that's where they always took us because there was less trouble there. So I was in this boarding school where parents felt if they're there, they're safe. But then it happened there. The school was closed and we had to come back home. So while we were at home and school was disrupted, my father one day says to me, you're going to write an aptitude test. I've never heard of an aptitude test. So he takes me to a school just around the corner, St. Mary's School for Girls in Waverley, and I go there and then I do aptitude test. And I was accepted into that school. Now it sounds like a very great idea. It sounds phenomenal. It was a powerful gift to me. It was it changed my life. But maybe I should tell you about what happened every day. So while I was at school, when I got there, first of all, I moved from a pit toilet to a flushing toilet. I moved from speaking Sitogwa every day and having most of the subjects, being explained in Sitogwa to English all the way. I moved from being being all black school to a school where there was a quota to accept only 7 black pupils every term. One of the things I could never understand was that it was not on to hold your friend's hand and to walk holding your friend's hand, because for the first time I came across the concept gay. I never wore a bra, because you only wear a bra when your boobs are falling. In my culture. Yes. In the white culture, you start wearing a bra very early on. So I was the talk of the boarding school, I don't wear a bra. And very quickly, I had to start wearing a bra. I couldn't speak English properly, so I struggled a lot. At my previous school, I was number 1. And here my scores were like 15%. And I remember the one day we did an IQ test, and by the way, remember at the time that IQ tests were only standardized for white South Africans, and I was taken through the test. And after that, the teachers, every single one of them would come into the room and be like, Tabea, you do understand, don't you? And I had to live with it. I had to now live with kids who would discuss with their parents that I have a boyfriend. Couldn't do that with my parent. Boyfriend, what is that? How old are you talking about boyfriend? It was a total culture shock. And I struggled. I've only been to St. Mary's once after I left that school. I have a friend who loves the school. And every time they say, hey, let's get back together as the old girls, she will be the first to come. And she now lives in America. So whenever she comes, she tries and make sure that it coincides with the alumni. And she's like, Tabea, are you not coming? I'm like, I'm not coming. Because it never, ever felt like home. Ever felt like home. I still get emotional when I talk about it. When I was doing the trick, I attempted suicide. Because I looked at my marks, and I looked at everything, my life, how I was such a misfit. And I couldn't think that I was going to pass the trick. So I couldn't face up to the shame of failing the trick. And then I drank gin. Little did I know it doesn't kill you, It just washes your stomach. But one of the best things happened to me while I was in St. Mary's. I met a woman called Zaza Albert, and she was my Afrikaans teacher. I think all of us, when we think of teachers, you remember the best teacher by name, or you remember the worst teacher by name? Yes. If you ask me about a teacher, that's the name that comes up. And Zaza was interested in learning Setswana. So she asked me to teach her Setswana. And so after school, her and I would sit in the class for an hour while I became her teacher. And that did amazing stuff for my self-confidence. And she kept on telling me that I could, when all the other teachers were telling me that I couldn't. She kept on telling me how good I am and how I'm busy transforming her life, when everybody looked at me and saw a loser. She's powerful. She remains somebody in my life that I will ever be grateful for being able to stand here today. Because the messages that she gave me now and then, carried me through, and I passed matric.
Wow.
I wrote JHB after coming from a school that was in Kotokwa. I wrote JHB. And because she kept on telling me I can, I passed matric. My question is then, what is it that they will say about you? Children always tell these stories. There's a book actually that Professor Janssen commissioned for 2 of the kids at Free State University to write on powerful stories about teachers. And these children just write and dedicate well wishes and their stories to the teachers in their lives. Are you going to be in that book? Will somebody be able to say, she changed my life? I was everything that was different in that school. And I think whenever the teachers and everybody spoke about a child who should not be, I was that person. But this woman gave me hope. And when children feel unwelcome and alienated, they cease to flourish as pupils. When teachers feel unwelcome and they feel alienated by principals, by school governing bodies, they stop to flourish. When as a parent, you do this to your kids, they stop to flourish. I have a blessing and a curse at the same time because I've got twin boys. So, one of the things that everybody would do is to walk into a home and say, so who's the cleverer of the two? Who's the funnier of the two? Who's this? And they're always getting compared. And the one that we thought was not the cleverer of the two is the one who had a distinction in matric, is the one who hit his degree record time, is the one who's already sitting with an honors degree while his brother is currently doing his honors degree. And I'm saying that it all has to do with what you believe about you. And teachers, parents are critical towards the definition of self and ultimately towards who performs and who doesn't. It's very true that you will never like everybody. And one of the important things as teachers is, or principals or employers, is to understand the impact of what we do. Because when we understand the impact of what we do, we can learn to love even the unlovable, to learn to make a difference. Even in the child that walks in, they're always late. When they speak, they're like, how does this child talk? You know those kids. This child comes in, they're telling me something that happened that was wonderful, and they use a swear word to explain how wonderful it was. I'm like, and I have to say, okay, take a deep breath. So what happened? Do you know that what you've just said is a swear word? No, I get and then you learn that this is how their parents talk. Words that I even struggle to push out of my mouth is common language to them in the home. So sending the right messages is critical, and leadership needs to lead, to set the tone. Because if we as leaders set the tone that it is acceptable to discriminate and to treat people differently based on their characteristics or innate attributes, we set the tone at the top. You do it with your own teachers. The teachers will do it with your children. And you can't come back and say, it is not done here. This is a slide that just talks to the power of diversity, embracing diversity in the corporate world, but it applies for any environment. Managing diversity allows people to become themselves, and it definitely improves people's well-being. The corporate culture is defined by this. Do you know those schools where everybody wants their child to go to that school? Even in the township, guys, they exist. Where there's a long queue, and you wonder why. But when you look inside, you look at the values of the principal and the values that are lived, it begins to make sense. So embracing diversity is critical because every parent feels my child is going to be given attention, my child is going to be loved. I feel comfortable in taking the place. In terms of employees, as a principal, embracing diversity assists us with employee retention. It allows for innovation, and organizations require dynamic workforce in order for them to be successful. If we all think the same, and agree on everything, then only one of us is useful. The rest of us are redundant. And we should work hard to strive to find people that are different from us. So one of the days, as we were reviewing our code of conduct, our dress code, in line with the employment equity plan, we sat in a room, put everybody in the room, and I said, let's review our dress code, guys. I think it has some elements of discrimination in it. So let us review it. So we looked at it, and my son at the time was temping for us. And then I said, so they said, like, it's fine, what's your problem? What exactly do you have a problem with? I said, our dress code says no visible tattoos. I have a problem with it. And they're like, yeah, who wants people with tattoos? Who wants people with tattoos? And we had this lengthy discussion. The boardroom got so heated because, you know, some of the people were just saying, will you be happy to have a receptionist who's got tattoos all over their face? Will you be happy to have that person be the nursery teacher at your child's school? And it got very heated up. But you know what we do? In defining our work environments like that, we leave out somebody who has a visible tattoo who can come and change this organization for the better. So that's diversity. Just embracing somebody who has a tattoo, I still have a serious problem with it. But I'm learning to accept it. I mean, one of the ladies has a tattoo on her arm, you know, and the first time I saw it, I thought, no, I think it's just drawing, you know, with her hair. And then it was still there the following day, and the day after. I'm like, Layla, what's that? She says, it's a tattoo. Listen to my response. Do you know what God says about tattoos? Yeah. She's like, who cares? Who cares what God says about tattoos? It's irrelevant to me. And I'm like, but it's important to me. So she turns around and she says, thank God I'm not you. Because I can have my tattoo. You know, and it was just such an eye-opener. And Layla is one of the most valuable employees I have in my organization. So diversity is critical for moving forward and achieving the best of your organization. So as I conclude, I want to leave you with these questions. Who knows that you're busy building a legacy for yourself by touching teachers, parents, and children? Zaza Albert subsequently died. She had a kidney failure and she died. But Zaza continues to live in my mind. And her story lives on as I tell it. Zaza, for me, is the epitome of somebody who made me to believe in me and to make me my best friend. So her story lives on. Who knows that the next president will come out of your school? And it just depends on what it is that you are communicating to that person. That you will nourish, nurture, and fertilize the mind to reach for the highest. Who knows what they will say when they meet you in their adulthood? And when they meet alone, what is it that they will say about you? Because we meet. Remember Teacher Samambang, she used to say this, he used to say this. What is the story that will be told about you? As a parent, as a teacher? Will they thank you? Will your name live on? At the end of the day, managing diversity is complex because people are complex. But the more we embrace it, the more we allow people and give them permission to be truly who they are. One of the things that makes managing diversity difficult is that we all have a frame of mind. So when I do my Bible school stories and I'm talking to these kids, the one day I will come in and I'm like, so I got into the shower this morning and I was showering and singing in the shower, and these kids looked at me and they're like, shower. Shower. Ma'am, what is a shower? And you realize that as you teach, the examples that you give must be stuff that the child can connect to for them to learn the best. So how can you then teach if you don't know them, if you don't see them, if you don't understand where they come from or what their issues are? How can you create the sense of I am because we are if the kids feel that I'm not as this, as so and so? And for me, I'm encouraging you to go and learn more about them and the stories that you will hear. One beautiful child, very dark in complexion. So we're talking, I'm saying to her, your skin looks so beautiful, Kukrana. She says, ma'am, I can see she's shy. I'm like, what's wrong? She says, ma'am, don't draw attention to me, I'm ugly. I started doing some work with Kukrana. It's one of the saddest stories in my work with Bible school, because we worked and worked and I never achieved much. And because of the messages that she received in her life, Kukrana, a very intelligent child, she used to write short stories, and she was saying, ma'am, read this because I want to write a book of short stories. But the little messages that I was giving her to turn that were not as powerful as what she was getting at home every day. As I speak to you, Kukrana is 15, she's a prostitute, and she's on drugs. Very sad. And it's because somebody kept on telling her, you're ugly, you're poor. So as I leave you with this message, I want to say to you, know them, know your stakeholders, know your biases, understand what pushes your button. Because very often we respond because our buttons are pushed, but we never really sit down and reflect on what exactly it is that pushes our button. But when I understand that I'm put off by people who have tattoos, I become more receptive when I see them, so that I can see the them that exists beyond the tattoo. Work with the true above, and the rest